Hi there, and welcome to the newest Devlog. I've not been sitting still since the last one, and I'm really excited to show you what I have been working on. All of it has to do with one of the core ideas behind Prophecy Island that I can now finally show off properly. There's a lot to go through, so let's just start. A simple way of adding replayability or reusing assets is by creating variations on the same thing. In its core, variants are just that, a simple solution to a complicated problem. But I've tried to give a spin to it that will provide each playthrough with a unique feel, but still preserving a somewhat predetermined design to guarantee an enjoyable experience. In order to explain better how variants will be used, let me give a bit more background info on how the game works. Your actions in your current playthrough will determine the shape and state of the island in New Game Plus. Along the main questline, you'll have to side with one of the major factions in the game, and this decision can have major impact. When your character dies in hardcore mode, or you've reached the end of the main questline in your current playthrough, a new island will be created based on the choices you made in your current playthrough. And this is where variants can come into play. Let's begin by looking at an example for the cities and towns. The layout of a city or town is generated randomly, but by following a template. This can mean that a certain type of building needs to be placed at the center, or that the city/town needs an X number of building types spawned. There are multiple variants to these layouts, depending on your state of the game. For example, if you decided to side with the city council faction, the city hall will be at the center of the city. If you chose to support the church, then the church will be at the center. In fact, if you decide to support the church faction 2 playthroughs in a row, you'll have shifted your universe so much in their favor that their major opposing faction, the Institute, will have no hideout in the city anymore. Their numbers will also be reduced among the towns. For points of interest, there are different categories of variants. There are simpler variants, like a dungeon entrance that leads to a different type of dungeon. I've introduced dungeons in the past already, but they are also a very clear example of a variant. The same dungeon generation algorithm is used, but different environment/enemy templates are used. Or a faction point of interest, where it depends on your game state on which NPC type is patrolling the area. The look of the point of interest won't change, but the faction occupying will. And thus, availability of these point of interests changes for you the player depending on your relationship with these factions. But there are also more complicated ones, and that's where it gets very exciting. The first more advanced point of interest variant is a multi-dimensional consequence variant. I like that one. I came up with it myself. Anyway, what that means is that just as the last example, its variant depends on your game state, but it does more than just swap the enemies that are spawned or what dungeon it spawns. Instead, the entire point of interest is swapped for something else. Let's show an example. Here is the Dragon Burial Site point of interest, a huge dragon skeleton that acts as a waypoint for far away. A lot of undead walk the grounds, and there is an entrance to a dungeon that leads deeper into the burial site. When the player finishes a specific quest associated with this, it will change in the next playthrough. No huge dragon carcass can be found on the new iteration. This time, a dragon chapel is found, containing a huge egg and a new faction to interact with. And without spoiling too much, and also because it's all still in development and not done yet, but when the player finishes another quest related to this new variant in their playthrough, the next New Game Plus will see the point of interest change again, and providing a nice secret for the player. So that's a multi-dimensional consequence variant. Nice mouthful. But that's not all, because I've saved the best for last. In my first devlog, I talked about my inspiration for this game, and among them was Dark Souls. Now, of course, the combat is a giveaway already for this, but for me, their level design is what keeps me coming back. The dungeons they craft are of another level, and for the longest time I struggled to see how I could implement something like that in my game, but I think I found a way. This is my first Souls dungeon, Castle of Cresta. castle point of interest with planned level design, multiple stages, shortcuts, and a boss fight at the end. Let's play through it for a bit to show it off. So first things first, we see a goblin enemy here. We kill it quickly and then we check out the area. We see a big gate, so we need to find out how to get in. And here we can see a hole in the wall, so yeah, let's check it out. And we can immediately see a new feature that I've worked on here, staircases. Staircases are really cool in Souls games in my opinion, because they really allow for cool, nice shortcuts, so happy to have them in there. When we get inside, we are greeted by a few goblins. I'm still working on enemy placement, so there's not that much right now, but it's a nice showcase of how this will work. And here's a nice small glimpse of the rest of the castle. We defeat one more enemy here, and then we actually go to another mechanic that has been added, and that's levers. After activating this lever, we're gonna open the gate and open our first shortcut. And very conveniently, in this variant of the castle, we have a mini boss in the courtyard, so let's fight him and see what he drops. Jumping right into another feature that has just been added, keys and gates that require keys. So let's go to the gate that requires this key and open it. There is also another way inside if you choose not to fight the mini boss, so let's check that one out. And here we are on the other side of the door. So let's keep exploring for a little bit. Here we have a small church area, ceremonial area, and after that we have a nice bedroom. Here we have a guest room occupied by another goblin, so let's defeat her real quick. As you might have noticed, I still have a small issue here where I sometimes push enemies into walls. Ignore that, working on it. And after having dealt with both enemies, we slowly make our way up to the top of this mansion to gain the last key necessary. And with that key in our pocket, we make our way to the door, open the door, and are greeted by our trusty angry troll boss fight. But that's just a static dungeon, I hear you say. No, this is one variant. Again, depending on game state and a bit of randomness, this dungeon will feel different each playthrough. Be it a different entrance to the courtyard, different enemy placement, or different enemies completely, or a completely different layout of either the lower or upper floor of the mansion. A different way to get the key to proceed, or a different location for the last boss. Of course, the general idea stays the same, and that is fine. I want the player to see this castle looming over the horizon, and even on their 10th playthrough still get a feeling of wonder because they recognize it, but they do not know what to expect inside. As you can see, I've been quite busy the last few months, and although progress is steady, there's still a lot to do. There's still a few core gameplay aspects I need to work on, primarily the ability to shop at vendors, the charisma stat that will give you the ability to have a team, and a first part of the main questline. Those will be my main priorities, along with some further improvements to the combat system. Once I've finished those, I'll be working on creating a playable demo. This will first be tested internally and then be released publicly, probably during a Steam Next Fest. But this is still months away, so don't expect it to show up before I've made a new devlog about it. In case all this made you excited about the game, then wishlist the game over on Steam and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And if you are so interested that you want to help out, then you can always buy me a coffee over at Ko-Fi. All money goes towards improvements for the game, no actual coffee. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.